Great. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, and welcome to this evening's City Council District 9 Candidates Forum. With us today, we have our Assemblypersons Inez Dickens and Al Taylor, and our other candidate, Yusef Salaam. My name is Sideria Asbury Crestfield. I'm from Central Harlem, and I'm one of the founding members of the Greater Harlem Coalition, along with Carolyn Brown from Sugar Hill and Sean Hill, who represents the East Side. The Greater Harlem Coalition is a grassroots organization with over 150 member organizations, and that include block associations, small businesses, houses of worship, schools, and others. And our mission is simple. We are working for a vibrant, clean, tolerant, and safe Harlem where we all can thrive. We want to end the decades-long practice of excessively packing drug treatment, harm reduction, adult-only shelters, and mental health services into Harlem. We all see that this results in a concentration of people struggling with mental health, homelessness, and addiction problems. Our goal is to balance compassion with the demand that all communities share in these disparities. And if you'd like additional information about our organization or to sign up to receive our newsletters, please visit our website at greaterharlem.nyc. So co-hosting with me this evening is Madeline Stokely from the Mount Morris Park Community Improvement Association and community activist and leader, Shatik Mitchell. Our timekeeper will be Sean Hill, and he'll let our candidates know when their time is up. So we're going to start today's forum with a few quick yes or no questions, followed by in-depth questions, which each candidate will answer. We'll follow with candidate-specific questions, and then questions from our Q&A chat. And we will end with our candidates' final comments. So that's our format for this evening. And Madeline, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you, Sideria. Good evening. Thank you all for coming to this forum. And I'm so glad that MMPCA has had the opportunity to co-sponsor this with Greater Harlem Coalition and that we work so closely together on some of our similar goals. The Mount Morris Park Community Improvement Association is one of the oldest community-based organizations in Central Harlem. Our historic landmark district spans from 116th Street to 124th Street, from Madison Avenue to Adam Clayton Powell. And we pride ourselves in our commitment to preserving and protecting our community's culture and historical stance. We recognize that we stand on the shoulders of those who preceded us that struggled to make sure that Harlem is a place that people wanted to come to and live happily and safely. So while the struggle continues, we are proud to be able to be part of this. So thank you. And I pass it on to Shatik.
Thanks, Madeline, and good evening, everyone. My name is Shatik Mitchell, community member and Harlem resident. At this time, I'll be introducing tonight's City Council candidates. Inez E. Dickens is the State Assembly member for the 70th Assembly District that includes Central Harlem, Morningside Heights, and Manhattanville. She is the former City Council member of the 9th District for 12 years. During her time in office, she has made education, minority woman-owned business enterprises, and income-targeted home ownership central to her campaign against gentrification. Inez began her career as a student activist at the side of her father and mentor, the late Harlem businessman and New York State Assemblyman Lloyd E. Dickens. In 1989, at just 15 years young, Dr. Yusef Salaam was tried and convicted in the Central Park jogger case, along with 4 other Black and Latino young men. The exonerated 5 spent between 7 to 13 years behind bars for crimes they did not commit until their sentences were overturned in 2002. Over the past 2 decades, Yusef has become a family man, father, poet, activist, and inspirational speaker. He continues to utilize his platform to share his story with others and educate the public about the impact of mass incarceration and police brutality rooted in our justice system. Assemblyman Al Taylor has represented the 71st Assembly District of Upper Manhattan since 2017. Before being elected to the State Assembly, Al Taylor served as Chief of Staff to legendary former Assemblyman Herman Denny Farrell Jr. and as District Leader. Assemblyman Taylor has served his community as an advocate for over 20 years as a veteran and a minister, working to increase economic opportunity, affordable housing, affect social change, and reform the criminal justice system. And he continues that work in the Assembly today. And I'll pass it back to you, Madeline.
Okay, thank you, Shatik. So I have the distinct pleasure of having the opportunity to ask those questions that I'm sure all candidates love to hate. And that's those yes and no questions, which I know is a challenge, but we know that you will be able to respect that and manage that. So I have 3 questions, and the way that they will be asked is each of you will be asked each question. And I randomly selected so that each of you are first, second, and third at least one of these questions. So I'm going to start with Assemblywoman Dickens and ask this question. Is the issue of oversaturation of drug treatment facilities in the Harlem community a priority item in your platform? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. And now, Assemblyman Taylor, the same question. Is the issue of oversaturation of drug treatment facilities in the Harlem community a priority in your platform? I'm sorry, we didn't, you're on mute.
It helps to turn this on. Yes.
Yes, thank you. And Candidate Salaam, we have the same question for you. Is the issue of oversaturation of drug treatment facilities in the Harlem community a priority in your platform?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Okay, so now on to the second question. And the first person to be asked the question is Assemblyman Taylor. Will you fund the one-stop facility? And just to add a little piece to that, it seems that other treatment facilities and programs provide a similar type of outreach and work as the One Stop. So the question is, would you fund One Stop?
I'm not clear. Are we talking about the drug treatment facilities on the east side?
Yes, the safe injection site on 126th Street, right off of Park Avenue.
Yes.
Thank you. The next person to be asked this question is Candidate Salaam. Will you fund the 1 Point facility?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And now Assemblywoman Dickens, same question. Would you fund the 1 Point facility?
Yes.
Thank you. Our last question in this series is, should drug treatment programs be located near Harlem schools? And the first person I'm asking this question of is Candidate Salaam.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Assemblywoman Dickens, should one? No. Okay. Thank you. And Assemblyman Taylor? No.
No.
Thank you. Thank you. And so now I am done with that great round of questions, and we appreciate you adhering to that structure. And I'm going to turn it over to Sideria now. Thank you.
Okay, so each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer these questions, and I'm asking each candidate the same question. So I will start off with Assemblyman Taylor. What will you do to locate drug treatment programs in the other 36 New York neighborhoods that are treatment deserts?
Great question. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I didn't say that because I had a yes and no before me. I would look to see how we can barter relationships. For example, there are numerous unoccupied commercial spaces across the city. It's no secret, even to the point where the mayor is thinking about changing public office space into housing. Why don't we look to use some of those facilities? Because if we build it, they'll come to it. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, and I would look to use some of the existing commercial space that's there in consideration for treatment facilities, so we no longer have to bear this burden in one zip code.
Thank you. Assemblyperson Dickens.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you so much for that question. It's imperative that the entire city, all 5 boroughs, bears the responsibility. That is not what has occurred here in Harlem. We have been the recipients since the 60s, when Oasis started to putting these centers in Harlem because nobody else in their communities wanted it. Now that Harlem has opened up, now we've got people that are joining with those who fought for years prior to today to keep so many centers out. I wrote a piece of legislation in the Assembly because that's a state issue. I wrote a piece of legislation with the help of Sean Hill and Eva Chan to prevent any further saturation in our community. It wouldn't do away with what's here, but it would stop any further, and it would demand that any further centers, drug treatment, because they're necessary. We have people that need these drug programs, but they need to be put everywhere, because right now Harlem is receiving patients from Staten Island, from Brooklyn, from Queens, from everywhere. It's not just Harlem residents that's using the sites that's here in Harlem. And so they need to have their sites in their communities, just like we have them in ours. So my legislation, if I can get it passed, and it was written extremely well with the help of the community, that it would cease and desist any further saturation in our community and force that they be built in other communities.
Thank you. Again, the question, what will you do to locate drug treatment programs in the other 36 New York neighborhoods that are treatment deserts? Candidate Salaam.
Well, thank you for that question, and thank you for you all having me tonight. You know, it has occurred to me that this is one of the most paramount issues dealing with safe streets. I live on 125th Street, right in the epicenter of all of the drug activity that's going on, right around the corner from where that young man was shot in the back of the head, and then the person who shot him came back into the store and shot him dead. You know, we need action yesterday to fix this issue. This is a blight in our community. And while there's a great need for attention to be had on this, it occurred to me as well that as those buses come over the bridge and drop off all of the patients and then come back and pick them up, this is the same thing that I used to see back in the days when I first came home from prison. And it astounds me that we still experience the same thing. I think one of the quick fixes is that all of the boroughs need to receive their fair share, and we shouldn't be the dumping grounds, because all of the social ills that are coming with that are right here on 125th Street and around these same communities. I think one of the greatest things that we can do almost immediately is perhaps start mobile safe ejection sites so that folks don't have to worry about coming and dumping into one specific space, but that they will get a notice and know where to go. Because not only that, the other thing is there are drug dealers right up and down the corridor selling illegal drugs to people. And so they're not going to the safe injection sites, not all of them. They're injecting right in front of CVS, right in front of Whole Foods, right in front of Starbucks, right in front of my building. And this is one of the biggest challenges that we experience and we see. And so I think that we should mandate, because the problem with having a brick and mortar place as a single drop-off spot is that there will always be people that will try to circumvent that process.
Thank you.
Thank you, candidate. Yes, thank you, candidate Salaam. So I will move on with the next question, and I will start with candidate Taylor. Wards Island shelters impact transit, business, and tourism along the 125th Street corridor. What will you do to reduce the impact of so many unhoused men congregating along Harlem's Main Street?
Thank you for that. It's a great question. Again, it comes back to a combination of things. I believe one of the first things I'd like to see happen is a relationship and we're talking to the folks on the island to maintain those individuals and bring them the services that they need without busing them into our communities just to get rid of them for 8 to 12 hours when we can meet their needs right there. So when you do that, and then look at the opportunities where there are moments where we may be able to refocus, if you would, some folks that have job skill sets, what are some of those things? So they're not all addicted, but they're homeless, or there's a sense of homelessness within there. What are their needs? And part of this is going to be rolling up our sleeves and having real dialogue and not just saying those people, put them on a bus, put them over there. We've got to really walk through and identify what do we have. We have those that are working. So for example, in some places, you do not have to come every day to get methadone. You can come once a week and go to work from there. We need the same ideas in the same respect when we're looking at our individual that can maintain jobs and go to work. Let's do that. And if they're qualified and they have skill sets, or we need to give them skill sets, let's do that, because you can't just push them off and say, let's get them out of here. But what can we do to transform their lives? A combination of working together with the services that are there and the ones that we need to bring in.
Thank you, Candidate Taylor. Candidate Dickens, same question. Wards Island shelters impact transit, businesses, and tourism along the 125th Street corridor. What will you do to reduce the impact of so many unhoused men congregating along Harlem's Main Street?
Amongst those that are congregating along our the only economic corridor that Harlem has, are homeless, which are not all drug addicted, as well as those that have a substance abuse issue. And the substance abuse issues are coming over from Wards Island, and they're being brought over by busloads and sent into their programs. I have advocated, and in fact, I've spoken with several unions, that in having these programs, instead of letting them come in to get their medical needs and then exit out, but that the unions come in and provide educational opportunities to teach them. If it's carpentry, teach them carpentry. If it's electricians, teach them electrical. The services that can be provided and will lead to them being able to get employment later on. Right now, they're just being released on the streets and not provided any resources whatsoever. And so I have spoken with the unions about coming into the programs and working with them and providing educational opportunities so that they can learn a job skill that would lead to employment, and therefore possibly getting off of the substance abuse or no longer being homeless. In addition, the shelters that we have built has been woefully inadequate in that they have become unsafe, they're unsanitary often, and it's very difficult for homeless men, women, and families to be able to survive in these shelters as they are today. In addition, we also are having the issue of shelters.
Thank you, Candidate Dickens, for your response. Candidate Salaam, same question. Wards Island shelter impact transit, business, and tourism along the 125th Street corridor. What will you do to reduce the impact of so many unhoused men congregating along Harlem's Main Street?
Thank you for that question. When I came home from prison, it was the most challenging thing to find a house. Having a house is a human right. Being able to call a place a home is a human right. And for us to find an answer, we have to look into the future as the possibilities are there. Because the future is, if we can provide all of the services that have been on the books to the individuals that so desperately need them, we get the opportunity to make them whole. And I think that what I would do is I would look at the services that are not being afforded to the individuals that so desperately need them and give them those services. I'm not talking about waiting to see. I'm talking about proactively going out to find who can utilize the services that we as taxpayers have paid our money to ensure that our community is safe, because we're creating an unsafe condition, because what we're seeing is the the combination of homelessness and poverty. And so we need to address this by giving people who need homes the ability to get them. Right now in our community, we have a housing crisis. It's so high, so it's so expensive to even live here. A lot of people aren't leaving on their own. They're actually being pushed out. And I think when I look at the issue from that perspective, it tells me and informs me that as I was once an individual that was in a similar case, and I think all of the things that I need really speak to the fact that we have to look into the future of how we can undergird and support the very people in our community that so desperately need those services, first and foremost.
Great, thank you. My next question, I will start with Assemblyperson Dickens. Many of the addiction treatment or support providers in Harlem practice harm reduction. What would you do to have these providers practice community harm reduction?
And that's exactly what we've been fighting for years. And it's dealing really with OASIS. It's dealing with, we can make promises, but it needs legislation. It needs policy change. It means that we need to provide just what I was talking about, opportunities for education inside of the drug centers so that they're not put out into the street and making the streets, our community, our village unsafe for the residents. And if you do that, because that's what's happening, they go in, they're in there for an hour and then they exit. And for 8 hours, they're roaming the streets. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, is if the unions, as part of coming into the communities, if they would really come in and invest an educational opportunity that would lead to a viable employment, then it's possible that they will be able to lift out of poverty and be able to get an apartment, to be able to be a part of what's known as society, because they will have something to lean on and not have drugs that they're leaning on. So that's why I have fought for that over the years, is that these drug treatment centers need to provide opportunities inside. They need to be able to feed them lunch and dinner so that they don't come out into the street, so that they are inside learning technology or whatever. The various unions, we've got a massive amount of unions, and they could provide this opportunity to those that are the neediest in our society. So I am still advocating for that. I'm still working hard for that. I'm still pushing for that, because that's the only way that we will really be able to help those that are in need of these opportunities.
Thank you. Assemblyperson Taylor?
That's a great question. And as I ponder, without question, my heart is heavy. We're really talking about more than a decade or two of this blight in our community. There's been a quarter where this has happened. And until there's this revitalization that has started to happen in Harlem, no one looked or cared two shakes about what was going on there with the lights half dim and things east of Lenox Avenue. So it's going to take a holistic approach. So how is it, because those people that are there are not the same ones that were there 20 years ago. That means we're graduating people to grow into that space. Where have we failed them? I think economics, education, the holistic approach is making them have a sense of awareness, a sense of self-esteem. And I'm probably rolling in my clergy hat, but people need to feel redeemed. They need to feel whole. They need to feel valuable. They don't want to hand out. They want to hand up so they can be able to be successful. And when you don't have those things, it's to say, hey, I've accomplished, you know what? Just my GED. I've gotten my driver's license. We got to put real meat on the bone so that it's attractive for them to do there, because I don't think there's not one of those individuals that say, you know what? This is my livelihood. I'm glad to be here, and you can't offer me anything better. Everybody wants an opportunity to change. We have to bring it in wholesale, unions, legislation, and the folks that are over there. God, it's just slipping my mind. that have said, hey, this is what we do, and they dump these into our facilities, we got to fight back hard. In my first year in 2018 on St. Nicholas Avenue and 147th, 146, they tried to put a methadone clinic right there in those brownstones. I fought, like, no disrespect, the Dickens to make sure we did not have that there in their existing program, send some over there, but then also give us the same tender loving care, because when I grew up in Harlem, when they were
Time.
dope. Thank you.
Okay, and lastly, candidate Salaam. I'll repeat the question. Many of the addiction treatment or support providers in Harlem practice harm reduction. What would you do to have these providers practice community harm reduction?
Well, first of all, thank you for that question. You know, I'm thinking about this from, like, how did this happen? You know, here we are in 2013, and we are still experiencing the same issues that we've been experiencing since I was a young child. I think when I think about this issue, I have to realize that part of what we're experiencing has been designed for us. We are literally living within a construct that systemically has created the issues that we are talking about. And when I think about the origin stories, I think about things like, if they can tell you that they're going to predict how many jails to build by the time a child in our community, by the way, reaches the 3rd or 4th grade, that means that the services that have been provided are designed to fail and create the conditions that we are fighting against. And so we're fighting the rocks that people are throwing at us instead of really fighting the main issue. And that is that our tax dollars need to go to support us as a people, because taxation without representation is tyranny. And we are living under tyrannical conditions. We need better because we pay our taxes, and our taxes are not reflecting the support that we need. And so what I would encourage is that we look at, how do we fix the problem from the beginning while still working on the issue at hand? Because our children are the ones who are being left by the wayside. They are becoming the oil in the machinery, the same machinery that looked at me as a 15-year-old child from my community, Harlem, and said, you're guilty because of the color of your skin. And the truth of the matter is that they've never given us a fighting chance, but we have to give ourselves a fighting chance. One of the things that I would encourage is the folks like the Tyler Perrys of the world, the Jay-Z's of the world, all of these individuals that they are putting in front of us to tell us that this is what we should aspire to. There's more than just a rap artist. There's the person who's signing the contracts. There's more than just the person behind the camera when it comes to film. There's persons that are dealing with the lights. All of these industries provide us an opportunity as creative people, the very people who were part of the Harlem Renaissance. We get the opportunity by turning the page and infusing that same soul and spirit that is here dormant back into our communities. This is what I would do as the candidate.
Thank you. So our next group of questions, you'll have 3 minutes each, and these are candidate specific. And since I'm looking at your face, I think I am going to go with you again, candidate Salaam. Madeline, I think you should start.
Okay, thank you. All right, candidate Salaam, having reacquainted yourself with Harlem, what have you concluded you would do to address the oversaturation in this community?
And by oversaturation, are we talking about the societal ills that we are experiencing?
The oversaturation of services related to drug treatment, facilities and homeless single male facilities in the Harlem community.
Absolutely.
If you add some other pieces to it, you can use that for your time as well.
Definitely. So I definitely think that we should take our fair share. You know, when I think about the totality of the individuals that are experiencing this part of life, I have no problem with taking our fair share of Harlemites because every time I've come back to Harlem, I've never left Harlem. My soul was born in Harlem. I was physically born in Harlem. And I weep for that. You know, I weep at when I see the same conditions. People, you know, you can't even go into a Target and purchase anything without ringing a buzzer. But that speaks to a different kind of condition. That doesn't speak to what's really going on, because poverty is a crime. We need to pull our people out of poverty. We don't need to make them comfortably poor. We need to give them opportunities so that they can thrive in this space called Harlem, because the very soul, as I said before, is here. We just need to resuscitate it. And I think when people look at me as I walked around the community and people are telling me that they don't have any leadership right now, that they're thankful that I'm in the race, that I've chosen to come back and participate using my platform in a really powerful way. I think all of the things, all of the lived experiences that I've seen as I traveled America and lived in different places, all of those things inform me of what we could do here in Harlem. Harlem is and has always been the Renaissance. If it happens on 125th Street, it reverberates around the world. We just need to remind ourselves about our greatness. And yes, we do need the support of the government to undergird and give us the ability to have our tax dollars reflected in all of the ills that we are experiencing, because everything is dumped into Harlem. Even when the sanitation workers come, I look out the window every day, the sanitation workers come and pick up the trash. And I say to my wife every single time, wow, the sanitation workers left trash. They dropped off some trash. Because in other communities, they clean up after they've come to clean up the trash. But in our community, the unsafe streets that we experience, we see it, we smell it, we step over it. We need better, we deserve better, because it is a human right.
Thank you very much. So back to you, Saderia.
Yes, my question is for Assemblymember Taylor. What have you accomplished in Albany to reduce the density of addiction programs in Harlem?
Great question. Thank you so much. Aside from funding some of these places to make sure that they had the resources there, not enough, not as much as I like to see happen. As I was saying previously, as a young man, boy, growing up in Harlem, those that were addicted to heroin, it was so stigmatized that if you had someone under addiction in your family, you tried to hide them because it was an embarrassment but they were addicted to something. Now we live in a kind of gentler America when all the Caucasians, I walked from New York City to Chicago, 780 miles against gun violence. And what I saw in Ohio, what I saw in the northern parts of Pennsylvania, what they wanted to be gentle and kinder and bring all the resources possible. I think we need to come back, take another look at this, and look at all the businesses that are there, all those that are attracted to this community, and say, in addition to bringing security, in addition to making sure that you're protecting the merchandise, like our president did, previous president, he wanted to send law enforcement to protect property, but not lives. We need to come back and say, what are you willing to roll up your sleeves and commit to help us change this blight in our community? Because it's going to take more than government. It's going to take more than us sitting here. It's going to take all of us rolling our sleeves up together and say, okay, we'll put 2 pennies on this, but then holding everyone accountable, because there are some young men that have names. Those are grandsons, those are brothers, those are sisters, those are uncles, those are daughters. How can we love on them to get them out of that space? Because they don't wake up in the morning desirous or wanting to stick a needle in their hand or something else outrageous. We have failed them, and there's much more to do. And as that councilmatic person, I would love to see leveling my resources, city, state, and federal, to make a difference over there. And I want to mention this, that Assemblymember Inez, I think, and then Senator Benjamin had a conversation, because it had gone so out of proportion over there, and folks were thinking about taking matters into their own hand. And we had a conversation with OASIS, and we must continue to have those conversations, because if the director or the commissioner doesn't listen to us, then we've got a governor that we must hold accountable, because we're putting people in places and they get in a ride sometimes.
Thank you, Candidate Taylor. At this time, I will ask the same question of Assemblymember Dickens. Assemblymember Dickens, what have you accomplished in Albany to reduce the density of addiction programs in Harlem?
All right, I'm glad we came back to the oversaturation, because I thought that was the question, the oversaturation of the drug programs that are prolific and throughout our community. I'm Harlem born, Harlem bred. I've never lived anywhere else in this country other than in Harlem. I grew up in the streets, and I saw the oversaturation grow from when we had no drug programs in our community, but one or two, to where we have hundreds of them now, and saturated mostly from St. Nicholas to Lexington Avenue, from 124th to 126th Street. That's the oversaturation. And that's why I asked Sean Hill, I asked Eva Chan to help me create legislation, because we can talk about the program. We all know the problems that's inherent with having the oversaturation. But your question is, what can be done? It requires exactly what Assemblymember Taylor said. We had to work with, in order to close down that one on St. Nicholas Avenue. I worked with him. I stood with him. We called in OASIS. We brought them in. We brought the community. We worked together. And that's what prompted me to get the legislation that I was able to craft. I didn't do it by myself. I did it because of your help, you that's on this forum now. And that's the first stance that has to be taken, is that to stop the saturation. And that's only done through negotiations with the governor, OASIS, and having legislation that says it must be distributed throughout the 5 boroughs. That's the only way we're going to stop the oversaturation in any one community. And so that's why I wanted and put in this legislation and have fought hard for the passage of this. We know we need money for education. We know we need money for programs. We know we need drug programs. But right now, with the oversaturation, these programs are not people, for the most part, that actually are residents in Harlem. If you go and visit, as I have personally done, I have gone into the programs on 124th Street. I have met with those patients that are there. They come from Staten Island. They come from all over the city, including the Bronx, Queens, everywhere. And you wonder, does anybody come from Harlem? That's what you feel like asking, because they're not from Harlem for the most part. And so it's not that we have these programs for Harlem. That's what they told us. That was what they said in the beginning, in the 60s, because that's when it started, in the early 60s. And that's when I was a kid running around.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the audience questions and their Q&A, and we will do that with Sean. Hi, Sean.
Hi, how you doing? Okay, so we asked audience members to submit questions, and we have a number of them, and we're also going to ask some follow-up questions that have been bubbling up in the Q&A afterwards as well. So I want to start off with candidate Salaam. And the first question that was asked of you specifically is, what is your plan to deal with rent increases in New York City?
Well, first of all, the rents are too high. My plan is to ensure that we get affordable housing, but affordable housing that speaks specifically to people's income levels. Because as I understand the AMI, what they've done, which is very, very unfortunate, they've pulled in places that have houses and homes and things of that nature, like Westchester. And so now the AMI is around $80,000. You have to remember, when I was 15 years old, Donald Trump took out a full-page ad that cost $85,000. That was a lot of money then, and it's still a lot of money now. The real AMI in Harlem is around $30,000. And so all of the services that are on the books, we need to ensure that our community receives those services, because when I came home from prison, they didn't tell me about those services until it was too late, until I too was being evicted from my home. And so the challenge there is to make sure that we get the opportunity to not only live in Harlem, but to thrive in Harlem, to get the same services that we so desperately need all of the things that I would do as your council member would be to fight for all of the things that we need, and specifically for affordable housing, but affordable housing, as I said, that meets people's income levels and not the AMI that's out there.
Great. Thank you very much for that answer. And I apologize. I should have mentioned to all three candidates that we're asking you to keep it under 2 minutes, and Sadira will be doing the timing for that. I'd like to pivot to Assemblymember Dickens for the next question. An audience member asks, what are your actionable plans to combat the amount of homeless people that we see who are in our community?
The only way that we can really get the homeless off the street in a humane way, in a way that is not abusive, is that we're talking about, the mayor is talking about the creation of units in the commercial buildings that are not being used or underutilized. Well, in order to do that, it's going to be very costly because most of those don't have sufficient windows that are required for housing. Housing has specifications with DOB that require that you have to have a certain number of square footage, etc. And what's necessary is, if we're going to do that, that some of that should also go to homelessness, where they're not packed in, but instead they have their own unit with their own refrigerator and stove and kitchen and bathroom, where they don't have to go into the hallway, where they're given an opportunity to live in a way that everybody else desires to live, and they do too. And so what we need to do is, if we're going to take some of those commercial buildings and renovate them, rehab them, then part of that needs to be done for the homeless population, but not to just pack them in like we've done with the shelters, but instead to create not shelters, but living spaces that allow them an opportunity to thrive and be respected by being in their own unit with their own bedroom and kitchen and bathroom. And until we do that, we're going to always have a problem, because the homeless don't want to go into the shelter. They're scared to death. There's stabbings, there's shootings, there's drugs, there's everything going in. And there's families going in as well. And although women, there's an organization here in New York City that is trying to build housing that's targeted towards families that are homeless and in the shelters, it's woefully slow in getting these buildings rehabbed.
Thank you very much. Assemblyman Taylor, the question that was asked of you is, how will you impact federal, state, and city policy, budget, and other resources needed to fight against domestic violence in Harlem?
Thank you so much, Sean. That's a great question. Leveraging relationships that I've been able to acquire over the last 20 years as a worker and chief of staff, and now as a legislator. What are some of those things that are happening? And I think also definitely resources, those relationships either on the federal level, bringing in more resources available to go that's targeted for domestic violence. Then you also have on the state level, bringing in targeted money for domestic violence, and also on the city level. And then I partner and continue to work with so many different organizations here on the grounds here in Harlem that are domestic violence. There are a few of them, I won't mention them by name, but they're there and they're making a difference, and they don't have enough to do the things that they need. So bringing real resources, but also I think we need to make sure that they were bringing with those resources the medical or the professional necessity to make sure that people are being properly evaluated, and making sure that we're holding the courts accountable as they're looking at these individuals that have charges brought against them.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, candidate Salaam. The question is, Manhattan and Harlem boast some of the most valuable land in the world. But even in Harlem, sadly, there are many vacant, rat-infested lots. What would you do to support land value taxes that incentivize better use of land with higher density rather than taxing property and punishing development?
Thank you for that question. You know, it occurred to me that I am a first-time politician. And as a first-time politician, I think about things in the same way I think that Harlemites have been talking to me about the issue. And all of these spaces that we've been seeing that have been here, the vacant lots that have been here since I came home from prison and probably before then. I came home from prison in 1997. The same conditions that we are experiencing are the same conditions that we have been experiencing. And as the future councilman for this area, I'm thinking about things from a very, very different angle. It occurred to me that we need, so when they've been talking about affordable housing, we've been talking about affordable housing. We don't even have anywhere near any of the percentages that they've been talking about that they were going to have right now in 2023. We're still waiting. We need affordable housing yesterday. And we need to incentivize all of the developers that are coming into our community telling us that they want to build and develop, just like the 145, now it's a truck stop. That's an unfortunate situation that we are experiencing right now in a place that has the highest levels of respiratory illnesses. We need to correct that immediately so that we can get the opportunity to provide our constituents with the type of value and life-giving support that they need so that they can live holistically in our community. Because we're talking about human rights. We're not talking about what I call politics. We're talking about very real issues that are destroying families. Just like when the spike wheels of justice ran over me 34 years ago. But here I am able to give a platform or able to stand on the platform that was given to me to come back and to try to look at things from a very, very different space, because we need all of the support and we needed it yesterday.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Dickens, the question is, how would you have handled the 145 project negotiations, and what experience do you have with other projects that would inform your decision on making around the 145 project?
Thank you, Sean. I have a history of successfully negotiating for income-targeted housing. When we talk about affordability, that changes from block to block. In addition, the AMIs that was used even by the federal for the Section 8 voucher programs that were built in the 80s and 90s was included not only New York City, but it included Bergen County and New Jersey. And that's why the AMI was set higher, because of the federal calculation of AMI as it relates to New York City. So we've got to understand underwriting in order to negotiate. Specifically, I've been able to successfully in the assembly lately, I was able to, and it's under construction now, 177 units of income targeted housing with an AMI of 40% to 80% AMI maximum, which the state of New York had not done in 50 years. I had to struggle to find the subsidy that will help to create it. In addition, there will be retail space, because we've got to understand that the retail space will also help to subsidize the affordability of the housing units. That's how it's subsidized, because the federal subsidy is closed down at HUD. And when it'll pick up, I don't know, and we can't afford to wait. So we've got to be creative and understand underwriting and negotiating. At the 145th, it required negotiation. It required the ability to understand how you can build it with the highest number of units at the lowest AMI without killing the development. That's what was necessary at the 145th, and that's what was not done. That's what I did, was able to get 114th Street, and between Adam Clayton Powell and Frederick Douglass. I can be very specific about the units that I have had a lot to do with, which was originally a NYCHA, and it's still with NYCHA rents. And it was horrendous condition, horrendous condition. And the electeds of the day was arguing, because I was newly elected. The electeds of the day argued, oh, don't believe it, it's not going to be nicer. Right now, the people have me to come down there all the time because that's specific about the developments I can talk about.
Okay, thank you so much. Assemblymember Taylor, someone from the audience asks, how do you reconcile contradictions between your personal beliefs and the majority opinion as represented in local, state, and federal legislation on same-sex marriage? Can you set aside your personal beliefs?
That's a great question. Thank you, Sean. And the answer is yes, I have done it. Look at my record. It is there. But I didn't get there easily, and I didn't get there for the sake of community. I got there because I had to wrestle with myself and understand what I personally believe, which is near and dear to me, does not override the thought and the vote of the people that I represent. So if we're looking at the legislation that I voted down 2-3 years ago and I voted up last year, I'm proud of my record. I've done a great job there. And I would say to that person that raised that question, great question, continue to hold me and others accountable. But if you just happen to do it because it's fashionable, I don't take anything that I do lightly. I hold dear to my faith, but I also understand that I've been representing something like 140,000 people, and I must give them access to their opinion. And I'm proud of the work that I've done and continue to do. Great question.
Thank you very much. Candidate Salaam, the question for you is, what do you think of President Biden's sweeping actions announced on the 14th of April to disrupt the production and distribution of illegal street fentanyl?
I think illegal street fentanyl should be disrupted. One of my friends, Michael K. Williams, lost his life because of fentanyl. And so we need to do away with any kind of illegalities like that. Because even what we're experiencing in our community with the oversaturation of drug centers and marijuana places and things like that, folks are coming into our community and they're selling people in our community drugs like that. And we're seeing people overdosing. We're seeing people needing, I forget the name of the drug that counteracts people overdosing. We're seeing that stuff happen all the time. And so I would be in 100% support of that particular bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Assemblymember Dickens. The question is, are you willing to be the first 9th District Council person to encourage a public campaign for annual participatory budgeting process in Harlem?
Yes, I did not support it initially because the funding was so little and they had not developed a system that made it feasible for the input of the community. Now that they have worked out all of the kinks, I certainly do. And I think that it helps, even though it's still a very small amount of money. It still will allow the community to have access and say to how at least some of the money will be spent in the community.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Taylor, the question for you is, would you support a protected bike lane on Adam Clayton Powell going from 110th Street to 153rd Street?
Yes.
Your 2 minutes are up. Thank you. Let me, thank you. All right. And I'd like to pivot now to Candidate Salaam. How do you intend to stimulate home ownership in District 9?
You know, we need support. And when I think about that question, one of the challenges in that question is the fact that we don't have a living wage in our community. And even the living wage, I think, has to rise with the fact that inflation is happening. And so we need a program or process that allows for that living wage to increase as inflation increases. Because if the rents are, the average rent in Harlem is $4,000, $5,000. The average Harlemite cannot afford that. We're being pushed out of our homes, and there's a land grab happening. People are taking over, and they're calling us, they're saying that we're leaving. They're saying that we're leaving in droves. And the truth of the matter is that we're being pushed out because we're having to decide whether we're going to feed our families or pay rent. And the truth of the matter is that we need living wages, and we need to be able to not just be made comfortably poor. We've been pushed into the margins of life and told to be satisfied. We've been, in the same words of that I've heard when they talk about the gnat line, we've been made to live below the gnat line and accept it. And that word was, that statement was attributed to Stacey Abrams. And it's unfortunate that we have been made to believe this, because the conditions that we are experiencing are a direct result of divestment in our community, or a direct result of systemic issues that have plagued our community since its inception. There's always been a plan, and that plan is to take our land and keep us poor. And so I would combat and fight against that with the people, by the people, and for the people as their councilman.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Dickens, the question for you is about financial literacy. And the question is, how will you work to educate and financially empower low and moderate income communities in need?
Well, financial literacy is important and should be started actually in grade school, where it's taught to the children of what it means to save, even if you're making, because back in the 40s, where people were making $5 a day and $7 a week, they had bottles where they were trying to save pennies. But what I did specifically to try to provide for home ownership is I wrote a program while I was at the city council. I wrote a program that was really specific for Harlem, but other council members asked me to expand it citywide, and I did. That helped to create affordable down payments for home ownership opportunities. And that was not just for brownstones, but for apartment units, be it co-ops and condos as well. And that's what we have on Madison Avenue between 123rd and 120th Street. That is affordable home ownership. And so is one on 110th and Manhattan Avenue. There are others. In addition, HDFCs was created for the opportunity for those who reside in a building to have the ownership of the building. What was lacking for them, because many of them started in the TIL program and then became HDFCs, and I was also able to help on 123rd Street with Pastor Ramos. I was able to help 3 buildings on that block to become owned by the residents in those buildings. But it meant that was the fight to find funding to help them to buy in and sustain. Those buildings are still sustained. They just had me to come down there last year and gave me an award for giving them the opportunity for ownership. So that's the only way that you cannot be moved out of your community, is owning something. And the HDFCs, and that's 3 HDFCs in that block. There are others I could talk about, but in that block, there are HDFCs that I helped to sustain and stay there. In addition, I went in, because I have knowledge of management, I went in and volunteered and taught them how to manage, because what HPD teaches is very insufficient. So I went in and taught them how to manage so that they can keep their buildings, stay there, and not be shoved out, and not lose their buildings, not lose their units, and their beautiful units right now that's there. I'm very proud of them. There's one on Amsterdam Avenue, the same thing I could talk about. So it's when we talk about ownership, we're talking about having the ability to own an apartment or brownstone, because that's what we got in the city. We don't have fabulous buildings with a lot of land around them. We've got units. And so HDFCs, and there's a strong HDFC coalition that fights hard for the maintenance. I work with them. I sponsored for them to come to Albany to fight for their maintenance, and that they not have a regulatory agreement that was unfair to them, because that's what came out of the city. And so I fought that, even though I was no longer in the city. I fought with them to see to it that their regulatory agreement was fair and concise and allowed them to continue to reside in their units and have ownership of their buildings, where they have to pay for the heat, the hot water, because they pay into it themselves, into a pocket, and they pay for the maintenance of their building. And they're doing extremely well. And that's why this coalition has been so successful. Now, the TIL program hasn't been so successful because of the lack of education for those who are participating, and the lack of having the ability to renovate, because that part of that means the city needs to go in there and give very low means of getting mortgages to do rehab.
Time. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my last question for Assemblymember Taylor follows on from that question. One of the audience members writes, there are several co-ops with income restrictions that were built with the 421A tax abatement program. Within the next 4 years, residents in those buildings will see their fees increasing incredibly and pushing up the cost of housing, potentially forcing some residents out. What will you do to keep these 421A tax abatement homes still affordable to Harlem residents?
Hey, Sean, thank you so much. I appreciate the question. I don't know that I will speak as long as my colleague, but I would certainly like to be able to. I'm like, my goodness, I live in an HDFC. I fought for this HDFC. We've been sold a bill of bad goods, and I'm still fighting, because as the city has made the medallion cap people whole because they sold them a bad bill of goods, they also were responsible for oversight. I could go on and on just right there, because there's so much that needs to happen. And the services that we paid for, we did not get. I was the first person ever in the New York State legislature. I have the most HDFCs in the 71st Assembly District, the only one to hold hearings in this community, bringing them across all 5 boroughs. So there's a lot that needs to be done there. So let's come back to the folks that bought. Now, they bought with a window. They purchased with the understanding that that window would close at some point. You get a tax abatement, and when the sun sets, you now are going to be responsible for that. I've had conversations in Albany to see how we can bring some relief. It's not a one and done, and I'm still having that conversation. I don't have an answer tonight. I spoke to some people on the east side regarding that, and anyone that has that answer, please come on and weigh in. But they purchased with the understanding that that tax abatement would last until the sun set. I'm trying to figure out how we can bring some relief there. There are a few folks that have come in there and been able to buy. Now, I'm going to say this. I think it's a great opportunity when you can buy. I think you bought with the understanding that this is what could possibly happen. And depending on the economy, and right now they're talking that R letter, which is recession possibility, it's hard to get money at a good price. So I will advocate for them. I don't have that answer, Sean, that this is going to fix it. They need relief. They didn't get the rug pulled out from underneath them, but the sun set on what they purchased, if you would. So if it was a 15-year deal or a 20-year deal, we're coming up to that point, and they're going to be hit with a fee that they didn't have to pay previously, which is going to drive up their maintenance or their taxes. Inez, can you lend a little bit on there? I know you have that, if that's okay with you guys.
If it's all right, Sean, for me to...
Because I want that person to get an answer.
Because the bottom line is 421A has limitations. It's only for a certain number of years, always was. However, it's dead now. We did not pass it in Albany. It's a big fight ongoing right now as to whether 421A. Those people that Al spoke about, or Assemblymember Taylor spoke about on the east side, they're living in buildings where, with the 421A having expired, and because we did not renew it, what they're saying, and it's true, their monthly rentals or their monthly maintenance will skyrocket and they will not be able to stay there. That's why I'm fighting for 421A. 421A was not perfect. It had its terrible, it wasn't overseen properly, but we need, I don't care whether it's a 420 or 480 or 590. We need some kind of an opportunity. Otherwise, those that are residing that Al is talking about, they're going to be pushed out. So we have to have 421A. It's important that we have 421A because that's the only way units are affordable. And what that does, see, people think that it helps the developer. It doesn't. What it helps is it keeps the cost of the development from being so high because they're not paying real estate taxes. It's no exchange of money. It's not cash. It's all exchange of paper. No money is exchanged, it's paper. And the city is saying, all right, you don't have to pay this for 15 years, and therefore the units can be at this reduced amount. And so what's happening is with the 421A that has expired, who Al has been meeting are those that are now being impacted negatively and will be shoved out of their homes. They have met with him, they have met with me. And they're frightened out of their wits because they know they need that 421A.
Right.
And so that's important.
Thank you.
Time.
And for equity here, Yusef Salaam, candidate Salaam, perhaps I'll pivot to you. Do you have any comments on the 421A program and the concerns of this question writer about the abatement expiring?
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing me into this this conversation. We need all of the subsidies that we can get, but it occurred to me as well that some of the planning that has happened to ensure that this land, these apartments, these homes are taken from us. And I think when we look at it from that perspective, we understand things from a very, very different reality. Yes, we need subsidies, but the truth of the matter is that we need to be able to be given things that we can afford from the outset, not some futuristic plan. That's what happened to the place that me and my mom lived in Schaumburg Plaza, when it was called Schaumburg Plaza, And it's not the same, perhaps, 421A, but we do need those same subsidies to continue so that the people who are living in these places can live there and thrive and produce families and continue to pour into our community. Because what happens if they don't? Then people come into our communities and they reap the benefits of all of the work that those individuals have done. And that should not happen. That's a shame.
Thank you very much. So at this point, there are obviously a large number of questions and follow-up questions that have been put into the Q&A. And I'd like to give Sadiria, Shatik, and Madeline to have the opportunity to take one or two or three of those follow-up questions or ones that have not been asked so far and ask those of the candidates. So perhaps we'll start with Sadiria and then move to Shatik and then move to Madeline to end this round of the questions. If there are any follow-ups that you found particularly interesting that you'd like to go with. So, Sadiria?
Okay, I'm going to start with our assembly persons and unfortunately have a little less than 2 minutes. But the question, what are your strategies and legislative ideas to increase services and resources for Harlem Hospital?
Me?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure if
Yes,
it was stuff. Hey, great. Again, increasing resources will not come out of city council by itself, but leveraging and talking with and developing and maintaining these relationships that we have and garnering more, whether it's on the federal level from Senator Schumer and Gillibrand, but certainly from the state, bringing in resources. In fact, I know myself and the Assemblywoman are part of, I can't think of the name, where we over at Harlem Hospital. And we recently sat down with them at one of the meetings, probably about a month ago, and they've given us a budget of what they need. So right now,
Yes.
that is on the table for me to bring. I don't know if it was
Yes.
$500,000, but we're working
Yes, it
in
was,
that
it
to
was.
bring those resources there. It's those type of collaborations and leverage to bring resources outside of the box that the 9th Councilmatic District will provide. Yes, you bring some money, but being able to walk through the door, pick up the phone and say, hey, we got a problem over there. Take that call. How can we help? Because those are the constituents across the board. They're voting on the city, state, and federal level. So I would look to garner more relationships as well as utilizing what I have to bring the resources necessary for Harlem Hospital and other places as such. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this next question, or did you have another question, Sedaria?
And I just wanted to know if the Assemblywoman wanted to follow up, but you go.
Okay, this next question I have may be longer than the response, but it is a great question. My family and I reside in Lenox Terrace. We have small children and generally enjoy our community. However, since the pandemic, we have noticed a steady increase in drug dealing and homeless adults in front of McDonald's and the grocery store in the corner of 132nd Lenox on the uptown side, placing secondhand items and stolen goods on the sidewalk for purchase. Elderly women and men have expressed that they are afraid of being robbed just for simply going to the grocery store for essentials. Some drug dealers are so brazen that they congregate in the same area daily in front of Golden Crust, conducting their illegal business. My question is, how would you address the safety concerns of the residents in this area? And would you engage the small businesses on the block along with the local precinct, social services, and the property owner? Thank you. And that question is for Assemblymember Dickens.
Thank you so much. I'll answer that, but I first want to give the bill number on the oversaturation that we're talking about. It's bill number 09571. That's the bill number that was put in and was written with the help of this organization of Eva Chan and also Sean. So I just wanted everyone to know, because in case you couldn't find it, 09571 is the bill number that I put in concerning, and it limits the amount of addiction and substance abuse facilities that can be within the jurisdiction of each community as it relates to the community board within New York City. So I just wanted to share that. Now, the question that you asked me, you want to repeat just the last part of it? Shatik?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. My question is, how would you address the safety concerns of the residents in this area?
You have to go further. I'm fully aware. I was raised in the Lenox Terrace. My family was one of the first families that resided there in 1959. And so I've seen what has happened on Malcolm X Boulevard. And it's true, people are afraid. But you know something? The store owners are afraid also, because they go into those same stores that you're talking about, and they will walk out with bagfuls of items, and they will have security there, but nobody says a word to them. They turn their back because they're fearful for their lives. We've seen on the news so many issues, and how can it be eradicated? We've got to stop purchasing that stuff on the street. That's number one. And we got to be honest about that. We have to stop purchasing the stolen goods that are being sold on the street. And I've been guilty myself in the past. When I was a kid, I used to buy the stuff. They'd walk in the store stealing, and I'd buy it for half the price. We've got to stop that. That's part of it. We're allowing it to exist because there's so many people that buy the products that they're selling. Now, that's one part. The other part is that we've got to be active as a community and attend our police precinct meetings, the community meetings that the community board has, and they have a safety committee, as well as each precinct, the 3-2, the 2-8, the 3-0, the 2-5, the 2-6. All of them have a precinct council meeting once a month. We've got to begin to participate and go in and tell what we're complaining about. We've got to stand united together, because one person is not going to do it. And the police,
Time.
they don't have the resources to leave a police just standing on one block for the safety, but that's what we have to do.
And could I just follow that up either with candidate Salaam or Taylor, specifically in this question in regards to elderly women and men have expressed that they are afraid of being robbed just from simply going to the grocery store for essentials. Some drug dealers are so brazen that they congregate in the same area daily. Would you respond to that, candidate Salaam?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for that. I think that what we're talking about is lack of enforcement. We're talking about a situation where we've literally been left behind. And I think when I think about lack of enforcement, we need two things to happen. We need concerned citizens to stand up just like they used to back in the days to make sure that we enforce those same laws on ourselves. But we also need the support from our local law enforcement to ensure that the safety is there. Because if we pay for these things, if our tax dollars is going to pay for the support of our community, where's the support? Our family should not be afraid. I have a mother who lives in our community. I have 10 children. 4 of them live in our community. I have a wife who lives in our community. We should not be living in fear just to go to the grocery store. The fact that we have police officers on, I just walked through that neighborhood. There were officers standing 2 by 2s. I literally just walked in that neighborhood. By 2s, they were standing on every corner. And so something is happening. Something is there's a big disconnect if our families are afraid to go to the grocery store, because the true issue is not the fact that these things are being sold by half price. The true issue is that we're living in poverty. Poverty is a crime. Everyone will participate in that undermarket because it's too expensive to go to the regular market and support the people in the community. But we have to support them. And we have to ensure that our community stands up and says, you know what, enough is enough. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acknowledging that you are afraid and standing up and doing something about it, in spite of you maybe trembling inside. Because I guarantee you, when you stand up and be counted, you're going to turn around and there are going to be others standing with you from our community to ensure that you have the support you need.
Okay, is it time for me to go now? Okay, so there are many wonderful questions and it was hard to really choose. But this is one that I'd like to hear. I think everyone would like to hear from each of the candidates. And the question is, how would you define gentrification in the Harlem context? Who are the gentrifiers? And what are the negative effects of gentrification? And I'd like to start with Assemblywoman Member Dickens.
Gentrifiers is the definition, or a noun that we've given to those who have moved into the community, but not just moved in, but moved in and instead of embracing and working within the community, within how we've already have a set. Many blocks have block associations, for instance. Around the Marcus Garvey Park, you had the Mount Morris Park Improvement Association for years and years and years. That was very active. And instead of coming in and working, the gentrifiers frequently don't work, but instead create their own. I've met with block associations that have been in existence for 40 years. And then there's those that have moved in of late have created their own block association and excluded those that were the indigenous population residing in the block. And they want you to meet with them, which is the newly created one and not the existing, which I refuse to do. I meet with the existing block association because I say then you join together as one. And so the definition for me are those that come in and instead of working within the community for the betterment of the community, instead wants to move in and form their own separate but equal, if you know what I mean.
I know, thank you. So now, Candidate Salaam, could you answer that same question? Would you like me to reread it?
No, I can answer it. You said the Harlem definition,
Yes.
if I'm correct.
Yeah,
You know,
definition in Harlem, in the Harlem context.
In the Harlem context, I think that if I thought about this and said, what would Harlem say? Harlem would say that the gentrifiers represent Christopher Columbus discovering America. We were already here. All of the conditions that Inez Dickens spoke about, we were the ones who provided the value in our community that they so desperately want to come to. They want to come to Harlem not because Harlem is anything other than the great Renaissance that is known worldwide. And I know this because as I travel the world, everybody knows Harlem. And so Harlem would say, people coming into our communities who don't respect what was here represent the same idea that Christopher Columbus did when he came to America and said he discovered America. Folks who came into our community were lied to. It used to be that you would be able to get a seat on the train after 96th Street, and then after 110th Street, and then after, now you can't get a seat at all. But the truth of the matter is that not only were they lied to, we as Harlemites have only wanted equality and equity. We've never wanted revenge. As a matter of fact, gentrifiers have knocked on my door when I lived on 138th Street, right off of Malcolm X Boulevard. And they said, hey, listen, I went to the grocery store and I got a cup of sugar. Is it possible I can get a cup of sugar? Not only did I give them a cup of sugar, I didn't give them salt. I didn't give them borax. I gave them a cup of sugar because that's who we are. And so I think when I think about what we are really talking about, there's this huge issue where people are thinking that they discovered America, that they discovered Harlem. No, you didn't discover anything. You need to work with the people who are here to support and build up.
Thank you. And Assemblymember Taylor, can you answer that same question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Marilyn. Great question. When I think about Harlem gentrification, I think about folks that have come in the last 10 years or less, good, bad, and different, embraced, a lot of them embrace, but there are some concerns where if this is the flow of the neighborhood, don't try to reverse it, roll with it. But for the most part, welcome. Unfortunately, some of the services that we get, we couldn't get when they weren't here. I remember the 3 train in particular was shut down at 7 o'clock, I think, something like that. On weekends, you didn't get a 3 train at 148th Street. You had to take the bus. The bus. And yellow cabs didn't come here. They didn't want to pick us up. So now all of a sudden you see yellow cabs that were not police decoys, but they were real cabs picking up and dropping off people in Harlem. We certainly got the services that we need. So I'm a good neighbor kind of guy. I think it's who you meet, where they're at, and what you give and what you get back. So, but one of the things that has happened, and we've talked about this early on, is the price of rent has gotten so doggone high. When the folks that were addicted to heroin on the streets, they didn't want to live in Harlem. When these buildings were overrun with crackheads and drugs were being sold in the Heights, nobody wanted these properties. We couldn't afford the flight. We had to stay and stand. So you had a till, you had a third-party transfer, you have HDFC. Now that we fought the good fight and we're here, now it's like, okay, well, thank you much. We're going to relieve you and go on. But I think, again, it's who you're talking to. And I don't put any one person and say, that's everybody. No more than I want anybody to say to me, then that's all of y'all. Take people individually. And there's a text and it says, our job is to walk, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. That's what I try to model.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to stop there. In the essence of time, what I'd like each candidate to do is to give us their final comment. And we're talking 2 minutes each here. And we will begin with candidate Salaam.
Thank you. This has been This has been excellent. I actually love experiencing what I've experienced, and what I've experienced has actually confirmed my suspicions. We need to create an A-team. And how do you create an A-team? If Inez prevails, her seat, the power that her seat holds, is up for grabs. If Al Taylor prevails, the power that his seat holds is up for grabs. I'm old enough to do something about the conditions that our community is experiencing. And I'm young enough to take counsel. Creating an A-team means bringing a person like me in who looks at things from a different angle. And yes, I'm new to politics, but I'm not new to Harlem. I was born here. I was raised here. My family is here. And while I left, I came back because Harlem for me was always the scene of the crime. And I needed to live a little bit to experience the juxtaposition of what true safe streets look like, of what it felt like to be alive and human again. And now that I'm back, I have all of those lived experiences that inform me of all of the ways forward that we can march for. If we turn the page and vote me in, we get the opportunity to have a movement that is created that will ripple into the future of our children's children's children that will be thankful for what we are doing right now. Because what we are seeing in our streets are sleeping giants. They need to be woken up and they need to be participating. We don't need to throw them away. We need to recognize their humanity. And we can do this. We can do this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyperson Taylor.
Hey, thank you all so very much. This has been invigorating. I enjoyed it, and I couldn't agree with all of y'all more. Thank you for the audience that's here, that's feeling these questions and hearing us. I am elated to be here. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. I was raised in Harlem, and I am a hard worker. I'm not afraid of hard work. I attend these community board meetings, the precinct council meetings, in and outside of my district. I want to be well informed, and I have a constituency base that gets served very well. I'm looking to expand that. And I would say this, thank God for ranked choice voting. So I'm talking to you all, and I'm talking to probably 300 other people that have made a commitment to be here tonight. If I'm not your number one, consider me for number two. If I'm not your number one, please consider me for number two. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyperson Dickens.
Thank you to the Greater Harlem Coalition for hosting this. And thank you to all the residents, the homeowners, the tenants, the small store owners that are participating and listening in, whether you spoke up, whether you asked your question, or whether your question was put into the queue and it didn't get asked. Please call my office for any of the questions that you feel that were not answered and you would like to ask. I am proud to have been born and raised here. I'm proud that I lived here. I'm proud that I came from a family that strongly believed in casting your bucket down and investing in this community to create an opportunity, not just for themselves, because when you do one can be kicked out. But when you stand united together, you can put a fist together and hold it down. And so I am so proud that I have had the opportunity. Harlem has given me an opportunity to represent you for the last 20 years. I know that this is a very tough time. We're coming out of a pandemic where we've lost thousands of people just from this community, and so many of our small businesses have closed up. We need experience, know-how, knowledge, creativity, the person that can negotiate, navigate, and understands without going in to learn. We have no time for a learning process. We need someone who can go in there and immediately start doing the work. It's imperative. Harlem has lost so much in the last few years. It makes you cry. We've lost so much, not just in housing, but in everything else, including funding. And so it's important. I'm asking that you vote and support for Inez E. Dickens. I'm not standing on what I promised to do. I'm standing on what I have done. I have a history of work that I have provided. I have volunteered. I didn't just walk in and say, elect me, I want a job. I was a district leader serving without remuneration for 20 years. Vote number 1, Inez E. Dickens. Inez number 1.
Thank you, and thank you to
all.
all of, thank you, Inez, and thank you to the rest of our candidates. What I'd like our audience to know is that Sean will soon put up a poll, and what we'd like you to do is let us know what you think of the candidates. And we're using this poll to put together a decision as to whom it is the Greater Harlem Coalition would like to endorse. So we're taking this information along with polls that we will take in the next couple of weeks and months, and we will form a decision based on your answers as to who it is the community would like to endorse. So please take a moment and do that now. I'd like to thank the candidates again for participating. And I'd like to remind everyone to go out and vote. I mean, it's actually 2 months from today that you're expected to be at the polls. And if you're not at the polls, you're not going to make a difference. So please put it on your calendar, do whatever it is you need to do, but just make sure that you're there and make sure that you're there to vote. Remember, it's ranked choice voting. You have your candidates here. We have one that's missing. Choose whomever it is that struck a chord with you and someone that you'd like to see us take us into the future. If you'd like to continue or start to support the Greater Harlem Coalition, please visit our website, greaterharlem.nyc, and you can learn more, and you can also add your name to our newsletter.
And I want to just remind people that early voting starts, and they must send in for their ballot to the BOE. So I just want to remind people that if they want to do absentee ballot, which means it's not that you're out of the city, but that you just want to vote by paper ballot and mail it in or deliver it to the poll site. You can do it either way. You can mail it in, take it into the Board of Elections, or you can take it to your polling site. And early voting will begin the beginning of June.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sean, any other thing you wanted to add?
Sorry,
Sean?
you caught me flat-footed there. No, thank you very much to everyone, to the candidates in particular. This has been very interesting and stimulating, and I really appreciate all of you and your time and your commitment to this amazing community that I now call my home. So thank you all. Everyone have a great evening, and we will post this information on our website, as well as make it available for review if you're interested through our newsletter. Thank you very much and have a great evening.
Thank you. Stay safe,
Thank you
everyone.
as well.
God bless.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.